After 5 years of marriage, Helene Fischer is causing a stir with her rarely open words. In interviews and public hints, she talks about inner struggles and expectations, which many interpret as an indication of an extremely stressful relationship with Thomas Seitel. But what is personal processing? What is media exaggeration? Was it really a marriage from hell? Or the projection of a life in the permanent spotlight? This video carefully classifies the situation, separates assumptions from statements, and invites us to look behind the headlines. Stay tuned for a respectful classification beyond sensationalism. In order to classify these private interpretations, it helps to look at the extraordinary path that made Helene Fischer one of the most successful artists in Europe. She achieved her breakthrough with albums such as Farbenspiel, whose songs dominated the charts for months. She established her position with sold-out stadiums, spectacular TW, primetime shows, and the receipt of international recognition. And with her mix of Schlager, pop, and acrobatic stage presence, she set new standards, consistently disciplined and in touch with the audience. This line of work makes it clear why each stage of personal development immediately catches the public eye. After 5 years of marriage, Helene Fischer is causing a stir with her rarely open words. In interviews and public hints, she talks about inner struggles and expectations, which many interpret as an indication of an extremely stressful relationship with Thomas Seitel. But what is personal processing and what is media exaggeration? Was it really a marriage from hell, or rather, the projection of a life lived constantly in the harsh spotlight? This video carefully classifies the facts, separates speculation from statements, and invites us to look behind the headlines. Stay tuned for a respectful classification beyond sensationalism. In order to classify these private interpretations, it helps to look at the extraordinary path that made Helene Fischer one of the most successful artists in Europe. She achieved her breakthrough with albums like Farbenspiel, whose songs dominated the charts for months. She firmly established a status through sold-out stadium tours, spectacular prime-time television appearances, and the numerous international accolades she received. With her mix of Schlager, pop, and acrobatic stage presence, she set new standards, consistently disciplined and close to the audience. This line of work makes it clear why each stage of personal development immediately catches the public eye. In order to put this present-day reserve and strength into perspective, it is worth taking a look at Helene Fischer's early years. A time which, unlike the image her later accomplishments create, was far less glamorous. Her life began with upheavals. As a child, she experienced changes that required her to adapt. New environments, new expectations, learning at an early age to fit in while still maintaining her own voice. Securing a future was no effortless task. It demanded a conscious, systematic process built brick by brick, step after step. Her talent was evident at an early age, but talent alone does not open doors. The path led through disciplined perseverance and the willingness to accept hardships. While her peers had freedom, her everyday life was shaped by practice, training, and clear goals. This structure provided stability, but also demanded sacrifice. Doubts were part of it. Was it enough? Am I good enough? Questions that weren't asked out loud, but were quietly lingering. The training demanded consistency. The pressure to perform was omnipresent, and setbacks were inevitable. Auditions, rehearsals, rejections. Every step was fraught with uncertainty. Recognition didn't come immediately, and the fear of being overlooked was real. This phase in particular shaped her later approach to success. Don't ever take anything for granted, avoid relying on applause, and instead focus on the work itself. Added to this was the feeling of being stuck between worlds. The pursuit of artistic identity collided with external expectations. Adaptation was necessary without losing oneself. Finding this balance took strength. Helene Fischer learned to channel her emotions early on and to maintain focus. Skills that later became her trademark. Real strength doesn't emerge from a place of comfort, but from the steadfast ability to persevere. Looking back, she describes these years as formative. They took ease, but gave her attitude. Those who learn to take responsibility early on develop a clear view of boundaries and the value of safe spaces. Perhaps this explains her later consistency in dealing with her private life, the experience that vulnerability requires respect. The difficult beginnings were not a burden, but a foundation. Over time, she refined her work ethic, cultivated her discipline, and fostered a deep respect for the audience. They taught her that success is fleeting, but her attitude remains. Out of these initial struggles, an artist has emerged who perceives control not as a means of wielding power, but as an act of self-care. These days, Helene Fischer's early years speak less about meteoric success and more about the unwavering patience and enduring perseverance she demonstrated. Her path, one that required considerable courage well before the dazzling lights of stardom, illuminated her journey, underscores the crucial realization true strength often emerges from the crucible of uncertainty, from the ability to navigate the unpredictable, without losing sight of one's own guiding principles. From these formative early experiences, a very consciously structured private life developed. Helene Fischer learned early on that closeness needs protection, especially when work and the public sphere overshadow everything. While her career is characterized by precision, discipline, and maximum visibility, in her private life she seeks the opposite in calm reliability and a clear framework in which not every movement is judged in. Her everyday life offstage has been determined by clear routines for years. Work remains central, but it no longer defines everything. Breaks are planned, and recovery times are consciously defended. This structure is not a retreat, but a prerequisite for balance. Fischer speaks openly about how important physical and mental health are to her, especially in a profession that demands top performance. Training, regeneration, and mindful use of energy are as much a part of everyday life as rehearsals and performances. She cultivates friendships selectively. A small circle of confidants offers support and grounding, far from expectations and cameras. These relationships are characterized by loyalty and discretion. Closeness does not arise from frequency, but from reliability. Fischer emphasizes that trust takes time and that it grows in silence. This attitude explains her reserve in interviews. Not everything that exists needs to be told. She also sees partnership as a process. Closeness and trust exist in a delicate balance. Lifestyles under constant media attention need compromises, clear communication, and firm boundaries. Fischer has consistently highlighted that private matters are best not negotiated publicly, ensuring everyone's comfort and privacy. Decisions are made internally, not on the front pages. This consistency protects all parties involved and has been maintained, even when external expectations create pressure. As she matured, her priorities changed. The desire for normalcy gained in importance. Small rituals, a shared everyday life, and time without an agenda became more important than grand gestures. This shift is not a break with her career, but rather a complement to it. Fischer does not seek stability in stagnation, but in consciously shaping the rhythm of her life. Today, her private life seems grounded and clearly structured. Less noise, more moderation. Visibility where it makes sense. Protection where it is needed. This balance is the result of experience, of highs and lows, of discipline and self-care. The film depicts an artist who has successfully learned to take responsibility for her own life, all while preserving her identity. In fact, their personal history does not portray a narrative of constructed image, but rather one of self-awareness. The courage to delineate limits, and the readiness to arrive at quiet choices. Helene Fischer chooses consistency over spectacle, thereby making it clear that genuine intimacy does not need to be explained in order to be effective. Yet in the past, this carefully protected private equilibrium was threatened by a real, publicly discussed conflict, leaving it unstable. No outright scandal in the strictest sense, but rather a debate surrounding the nature of artistic expectations and what constitutes authenticity. At the heart of this debate, which largely erupted from allegations of lip-syncing during her extensive live performances, lay Helene Fischer. Selections of concert footage and TV appearances were employed by certain sections of the public as supporting evidence. Fischer did not sing live all the time. What followed was a heated discussion. Supporters pointed out the extreme physical demands of her shows. Singing combined with acrobatics, dancing, and elaborate choreography. Critics demanded maximum transparency and live singing without technical support. The core of the debate revolved less around substantiated evidence of misconduct and more around the crucial question of what standards ought to govern the creation of modern pop productions. Fischer herself did not engage in any heated exchanges. Instead, her entourage emphasized that different technical means are common in large-scale productions and that the artistic standard lies in the overall experience. The way Fischer handled the controversy was remarkable. Fischer avoided exaggeration, did not correct every assertion, and focused on continuity. She held firm to her concept, explaining the processes where necessary, and shifted the focus back to the music and This attitude earned her both respect and criticism. A classic conflict of goals between pressure to perform and artistic freedom. The debate was an example of how quickly public interpretation can take on a life of its own. On social media, excerpts become more condensed into judgments, and nuances are lost. The fact that Fischer had demonstrated her voice live and powerfully in other contexts was temporarily overlooked. The scandal thus consisted primarily of friction between ideal images and the reality of the production. In retrospect, this episode does not mark a flaw, but rather a milestone. It made clear how high the bar is for female artists at this level and how narrow the line is between perfection and the trap of expectations. Fischer did not respond with justification, but with consistency. Clear procedures, professional standards, and the avoidance of media escalation. Therefore, this controversy continues as a compelling demonstration that public disputes are not always the result of errors, but rather originate in differing conceptions of what constitutes genuine authenticity. Helene Fischer handled this debate with calm and discipline, thereby demonstrating that attitude is not demonstrated by volume, but by the ability to maintain one's own course. In the aftermath of this public dispute, the spotlight once more fell upon a highly personal aspect of Helene Fischer's life, the truth surrounding her marriage and relationship. This is precisely where it becomes apparent how quickly attributions arise, and how little they do justice to the actual dynamics. Fischer has always protected her relationship life from simple judgment. When she talks about intimacy, she is talking about values, trust, respect, and the need for clear boundaries in a life that is constantly being watched. The relationship with Thomas Seitel developed in an environment of maximum visibility. Parallel to tours, major events, and creative achievements, private life had to function without any protective space. This context is crucial. High workloads, travel, and pressure to perform increase friction without automatically leading to conflict. Fischer has repeatedly emphasized that partnerships need to be consciously nurtured under such conditions. Communication without an audience, shared routines, protection from projections. Often public narratives will depict pauses as a crisis, misreading restraint itself as a sign of significant distance. Fischer contradicts this logic with consistency. She does not comment on every interpretation, but rather maintains the separation of stage and private life. Closeness, according to her attitude, is not demonstrated in statements, but in everyday life. Decisions are made internally. Changes are part of life's phases and are not a verdict of guilt. As she matured, her view of partnership shifted further. Health, balance, and reliability gained in importance. Grand gestures receded in favor of small, sustainable structures. This isn't a step back, but rather a calculated decision to prioritize our efforts. Fischer says that stability does not come from stagnation, but from the courage to set boundaries even in the face of external expectations. So, the true reality of her marriage doesn't reside in dramatic or oversimplified labels, but rather in a dispassionate view of things. Relationships in the spotlight are demanding and need protection. Those signs of pressure and the desire for normal life are present. There's been no public accountability. The shades of grey count closeness and distance, work and rest, publicity and privacy. This perspective undermines sensationalism. It reminds us that private relationships have no obligation to tell a story. Helene Fischer chooses dignity over volume and clarity over exaggeration. Consequently, the unspectacular nature of their marriage makes it all the more believable. Responsibility for one another, respect for private matters, and the willingness to shape developments without an audience. Her approach to partnership naturally leads to a more transparent understanding of the truth concerning family within the context of Helene Fischer's life. For her, family is not a public concept, but a protected space that is supposed to provide stability, especially because her everyday professional life is shaped by visibility and pressure to meet expectations. This drawing of boundaries isn't a retreat, but rather a deliberate choice committing to responsibility and care. In a family context, closeness means reliability above all. Fischer emphasizes the fact that time isn't just measured, it absolutely must be structured. And when work phases are intensive, clear, agreements and rituals become more important. Family does not thrive on frequency, but on quality. Listening, being present at crucial moments, and the willingness to set priorities. This attitude protects relationships from the pull of the public. Over the years, everyday family life has changed. Phases of life shift roles. Expectations are rearranged. Fischer approaches these changes with pragmatism. Instead of a fixed ideal, family is a process that necessitates continuous adaptation. Especially in times of high stress, the importance of mutual respect and patience becomes apparent. Conflicts are not staged, but rather classified. Closeness is created quietly and away from cameras. A central issue remains the protection of privacy. Public attributions simplify complex realities. In response to that, Fischer refrains from commenting on family matters and therefore maintains a sense of normalcy. This boundary is an expression of respect for people who are not part of the stage. Children and relatives in particular deserve a daily life without projections, with mistakes, development, and peace. For her, family also means responsibility in everyday life. Decisions are made with an eye on the whole, health, stability, and long-term balance. Grand gestures are less important than sustainable structures. This sobriety is the result of experience. Anyone who has learned that success is fleeting appreciates the value of consistency. Today, her family environment seems grounded and clearly structured. Less noise, more moderation. Closeness is created through reliability, not through visibility. Time is shared more consciously, and safe spaces are consistently defended. This form of family is unspectacular, but resilient. It supports a life that is otherwise very demanding. The real story behind her family isn't one of dramatic disclosures, but rather one of unwavering care and nurture. Of the decision to preserve what is essential, even when curiosity is great. Of the insight that staying together is work. Continuous, quiet, and far from the headlines. For Helene Fischer, family is the place where she does not have to perform, but where she can arrive. At the end of this story, there is no judgment but compassion. Helene Fischer is more than an icon of success. She's someone who's carried enormous expectations on her shoulders for years. Behind discipline, perfection, and the stage are also fatigue, responsibility, and the desire for protection. Empathy involves recognizing the human side and acknowledging that cultivating closeness, family, relationships, and inner balance demands considerable effort, particularly when under the spotlight. If this story has touched you, show your support. Give the video a thumbs up. Share it with people who value respect and differentiation. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any more of our honest portraits. We welcome your comments. What aspects of this video made you pause and reflect? What key takeaways will you remember? With each voice contributing, we build a space where humanity is valued more than any sensationalism. Together we are making a statement for compassion, fairness, and looking beyond the headlines.